like to welcome you to the place. This is the place for intellectual, spiritual, and scriptural honesty. My wife is not here tonight. It's one of these situations to where we wanted to spend some time with our son. Our son goes back to Italy first thing in the morning, and so this is one of those times where you want to spend all that time hugging his neck and pleading with him not to go.
Not this son.
I just received, I'm talking about John. And our daughter-in-law just arrived in Kuwait, just received a text message that stated that she arrived safely. And so please understand why my wife is not here. It simply has to do with enjoying our children. Tonight we have two amazing people who have come to the place and shared not just their knowledge, but their love, their compassion, their lives. And I want to talk about that a bit tonight. And that's why I wanted to have them on the show, because I'm not convinced that people really know the heart of Bob Graves and Greg Bray. I mean, these are two awesome individuals. They both have shows. We have Inspiring Honesty with Greg Bray and his co-host, Bob Graves. And then Bob, he's this unconventional pastor, and that's not hyperbole at all. It suits him well. I mean, it's the perfect fit. Normally when people refer to themselves as X, Y, or Z, normally that just doesn't work at all. But in this case, it's working in a very, very wonderful way. I can say about Bob and Greg, these people are not just good at doing shows. These two individuals are awesome people. And we want to talk about these two guys tonight and their shows. And if you guys have questions or comments tonight, I want you to text me at 850-572-7441 if you would like to ask a question concerning their shows, etc. And so tonight it's all about Bob and it's all about Greg.
Before we talk about Bob and Greg, can we talk about me for a second?
Yeah, it's going to be your birthday tomorrow. And
yeah, that's not really what I was wanting to talk about.
Okay.
What I was wanting to talk about was that it dawned on me this morning that my only camera time was on The Beginnings of Greatness. And it's not a serious show. It's the only show on the network that is not serious. So I thought, hey, I can just dress like I normally dress. I can wear my Battlestar Galactica t-shirt. I can wear my shorts. And I can just relax and kick back. And it's the one time in probably, a month now, that you have asked me to come up and sit up on stage with you. And so I just wanted to talk about how ironic that was, because now here I am on a serious segment with this. So anyways, I'm done. I just wanted to voice my objection.
You want to feel included? Is that correct?
No, I feel like I've been tricked.
You've been tricked.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would have worn my Battlestar Galactica t-shirt and shorts had I known you were going to have me up here this
A few
evening.
minutes ago, Greg, he's actually wanting for you to draw a cartoon of his face.
I know.
And I don't know whether you were trying to be sarcastic to him or what.
No, I wasn't being sarcastic. I've thought about drawing everybody. He was afraid that I wasn't doing it because I didn't want to insult him. I thought that was laughable. I'm happy to insult Greg.
Yeah, I need to advise him. I've had you do many of me, and I haven't been satisfied yet.
Yeah.
So maybe he needs to be
That's
picky.
because you have a false image of what you actually look like.
That's good. That's good. Let's welcome Bob Graves and also Greg Bray to the show. Bob, jump in.
Hi. Good to be here. And thank you for the very kind words. I've just enjoyed being a part of this family here at the place, and the opportunity to get to know many of the people that are involved here, as well as some of the people we've invited as guests. It's just been terrific, and thank you so much.
Your last guest was amazing, David. Talking
David Hayward.
about
Yeah, the Naked Pastor.
his drawings.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was a special interview, particularly for me, because I enjoy artists, and he is a very, very thoughtful artist, and I enjoy his cartoons very much. They're very meaningful, and whether you agree with what he's saying in those cartoons or not, they're very provocative. They spark conversation. And I think that that's what good art is all about, to get people thinking. And so I really enjoyed that. And I really enjoy all your hard work, Bob, in getting all of your guests on. They've all been extremely interesting, and I really commend you. Your work has been worthwhile, and you're creating a fantastic show.
Thank you.
Greg, jump in.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's nice, really, to be invited or to be introduced on a show instead of. For the record, anybody watching, I ad-lib the opening to every single one of my shows, aside from the "Hi, I'm your host, Greg Bray, and I'm an atheist." That's really the only thing that I plan ahead of time. Otherwise, it's all straight off the cuff. So it was nice to just sit here and let somebody else come up with all that. So thank you. I've appreciated the opportunity to not only be part of the network, but to be part of this show today, where I don't have to think as much.
Do you enjoy, and this question is to both of you guys, do you enjoy the fact that you guys are not being censored?
Never thought about it. So the fact that I'm not even thinking about it indicates that it's certainly been very freeing, and I've appreciated very much the fact that we're not worried about we're not actually being violent to each other, but there's nobody's holding any punches. We're talking about the things that are honestly on our mind, and I appreciate that. That is so freeing. There's almost a sense that no matter what it is you think, everybody has a certain need to just be heard, to have an opportunity to say what you think, what's on your mind, and I've appreciated that. I felt the freedom of it tremendously. Yes.
I'm thankful that we live in an age where we can even create a network that shows, and a network that isn't censored. We have this wonderful new medium called the World Wide Web, and it's a place where anybody can have an opportunity to speak their mind, etc. But one of the challenges that you run into with that is that if you're just one person out there just trying to speak your mind, it can be very difficult to get the attention that you need without being a what's the word I'm looking for, a shock jock type of person. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to do that. We want to speak intelligently and objectively about issues and topics, and so what I'm really thankful for about the place is the ability to bring all of these intelligent minds together and just allow an uncensored discussion to take place. And when I use the word discussion, I'm not talking about the discussions on Greg's show, which are amazing in and of themselves, or the discussions on Bob's show, which are fantastic, or the discussions that we have, or your teaching on stage. I'm not talking about one particular thing. I'm saying there is a dialogue, there is a discussion going on through all of these shows. All of these shows are very connected in the sense that we are all trying to get to the heart in a way that is as objective as we possibly know how to do. We're trying to get to the heart of what we believe is real and important. And I think that that's unique. There are a lot of shows out there that are trying to get to important issues, but they're a lot of them are driven by corporate funding, advertising dollars, a system that already has a fixed belief. And that's not what this show is about. It's about just listening to people. That's not what this network is about. And so, Greg and Bob are an important part of that. And, they're already playing such a vocal role. And I'm thankful for that.
I'm sitting here reading text messages. It seems like I've had maybe 20 in the last 2 or 3 minutes. So let me phrase some of these questions or condense them in a way that we can save some time. This first question goes to Greg. Have you changed your mind about anything since you've started your show? If so, what would it be?
I think that's a difficult question. Changing my mind would have to, or I guess that would imply that my mind was set on everything that I had talked about, that I had opinions. And I think the better way to describe it is that I've been enlightened to ideas and concepts that I had not even heard or considered before. I still do not believe in any gods. I am still a scientific naturalist, and I have not changed that portion of it. However, I certainly have come to understand more about theism, deism, and some of the more nuanced arguments. And it comes a lot when you're a devangelist, as I like to call myself. You end up in the same conversations over and over, and the same arguments get brought up, and it can be repetitive and redundant. And that's what I've enjoyed about the show is that we haven't hit that, and I don't foresee that happening. We're trying to bring in such a variety of guests that everything is new, and new concepts, new questions, new answers, new viewpoints, and I've appreciated that in a lot of ways. But I stick to my guns that my goal, I appreciate being invited to be part of the network, but I want to convert all of you. So don't think me altruistic here.
I guess the sense of the question was not to be intended. I don't think the viewer intended it to be, have you become a theist? It's more or less, has any theist actually enlightened you in the sense that it has given you a little bit more room to think about theism in a different way?
Certainly, and Bob and Alan have been fantastic at giving me different ways to see the world, different lenses to view things through, and different angles that I wouldn't have come upon myself. So it's been, I think enlightening is the best term to use it. It's opening my mind to new ideas, new concepts. It's an education and an edification, if nothing else.
Right. One of the things that I really enjoy about your show is that it really emphasizes the idea of process. For instance, if a student is sitting in a science classroom and acts like a religious person and tells the professor, I want to know all the truth right now, that professor will simply tell that student, are you crazy? Or, what's wrong with you? This is not about a fixed belief. This is about learning processes of science. And one of the things that I really respect about your approach, your show, is that it's not trying to give absolutes. It's not trying to shove people in that direction. You're simply trying to engage in a conversation that would be educational, number one, enjoyable, number two, possibly, and bring people to the table of discussion for the purpose of the journey, and that's much different than what most of us have experienced in religion.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to say, when I had talked with Alan before he was on the show tonight, it was the first opportunity that I'd had to have sort of a third-party perspective for somebody coming onto the show and wondering what it was about. And it was interesting for me to see sort of the apprehension and the excitement coming from a different angle. I mean, of course, I have it every week, but it's a completely different situation when you're seeing it come from somebody else. And what I had said to him that I think was more true, the more I think back of it, or at it, than I even realized when I wrote it, was that the goal of our show, I say that it is to, I say that my goal is to convert you, but it's a little tongue-in-cheek. I'm hoping you recognize that the real goal is to expose people to different ways of thinking, ways of reasoning, and expose the questions that they may not have exposed themselves to. I saw something online just in between my show and this one that was somebody saying, do you think it's fair to avoid books or to criticize books like Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion or The Shack, who I don't know the author of off the top of my head, without reading them first? Yeah.
Without having read it first? Yeah, that's so crazy. Now if I have at times spoken about things that I hadn't read, but I try to preface that with, if what someone else is telling me about this book is so, then I'm, a little concerned about this. But at the same time, that's a huge if. By the way, Greg, I can say this, that I one of the things that has changed me, and as we've gone through this show, I've certainly gotten to like you a lot more and gotten to know you some, but also I find that by talking with people who really don't see it my way, that I find that I can't just be dismissive. I can't. I have to really ask myself, this obviously makes sense to you, and I need to be aware of that. I need to be sensitive to that, and I need to realize that even if I don't agree with you, there's got to be good reasons why this makes sense to you, and whatever those good reasons are, they are good reasons that I have to incorporate in a different conclusion if that's where I'm going. And so I found that it enriches me to hear what you're saying. And I think that many people who are theists, if they are just closed off, it is amazing how ridiculous anybody's thinking can be when it happens within a small circle. Everybody becomes somewhat yes man inside the small circle. So I've appreciated
that was the closing of that
expanding.
very post. It said, I know that we're responsible to guard our minds. I looked at that as one of the scariest statements I've seen in a while. Like, guarding your mind from contradictory opinions seems terrifying to me. That's a fantastic way to breed fundamentalism and extremism.
Ricky, can you pull up our Skype sound a little bit on the house so that we can hear them a little bit better? I know there's a balance between these mics and those and Skype, so he can only get it so loud, and then it'll start ringing.
Now this question doesn't come from a viewer, but it actually comes from me, and this is posed to you first, Bob. It appears as if you and Greg are really concerned about what fundamentalism has done to people. Is that true?
For myself, I see it as a very damaging impact. I think I can empathize with the kind of insecurity that causes it, and the sense of fear or whatever that makes people feel we have to nail this down to the floor with so much adamant certainty. So that, yeah, I am concerned about what fundamentalism does. Yet at the same time, I don't want to silence its voice. it's a tough thing to decide what to do, because I'd say that of all, I have far more in common with what Greg thinks than with what a fundamentalist might think. That's for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. One of the things that I'm concerned about in this discussion is that I think that oftentimes theists get labeled. And I think that some people think that all theists are like fundamentalists. And one of the things that I hope to do, possibly in my lifetime, is to demonstrate that most of the rhetoric concerning theology really isn't a literal, or it's not a literate kind of theology. And what's meant by that, most people are using all kinds of arguments based upon systems of translations that are extremely synthetic, and it's rare that you meet, for instance, atheists who are even literate enough to deal with textual criticism, things of that nature.
I would actually disagree there, and that's a significant point, I think, in favor of atheists of the world today, is most of them are first generation. There's very few atheists that are raised in secular households, and there's something, even when I went through the RCIA program to become Catholic in college, I studied with a priest for hours after each class, to the point where he was, I'm sure, quite frustrated. But he said, and I've heard it many times before, is that converts make the best Catholics. And I think that that's true of any religious or ideological understanding, is that if you've been raised with it, you don't truly understand it in the same way. And as most atheists have come to the conclusion of atheism on their own and weren't raised in that respect, at least in the United States, it's something that we tend to be, and this is documented, a bit more educated and literate. Not to say that we're all there or anywhere near the level that, say, experts are in linguistics and textual criticism, but I've met more atheists that have read the Bible cover to cover than I've read or met Christians that have done it.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Shame, but it's,
well,
it's true.
I do agree that more atheists know more about English translations. I guess my point, and I should have qualified what I was referring to, I find that many people are speaking about these, and I keep using the term meta-language. We keep referring to these synthetics rather than dealing with primary text. In other words, all of the conclusions that Richard Dawkins, for instance, draws conclusions from, all of those are secondary documents, and we're talking about not just a copy of a manuscript. We're talking about these are extremely synthetic models of translation theory, and the majority of them are extremely failed. And yet he would not practice that kind of he would not practice anything like that in his discipline, yet in theology he doesn't mind using secondary documents. And the question would be, why?
Well, I think I can answer that pretty succinctly, is that Richard Dawkins and most atheists make their arguments from their arguments for or in favor of atheism not based on any text whatsoever. That's in my situation, it comes from a position of scientific naturalism, and from what I see as an objective view of the world and the universe, and that's what leads to the atheist "there are no gods" perspective. But there's also then the criticism of religion, which is tied to atheism, but not an intrinsic part of it. Atheism would exist as the default position if there was no such thing as religion, and we wouldn't have to discuss any of the texts or things. So as an atheist criticizing religion, it's not necessarily the same responsibility for Richard Dawkins or for me to argue against the accurate and perfectly translated model of what has been truly written and what the religion should be or ought to be, but instead what it is, how it is practiced today, how it is interpreted today, and how it is understood today by the vast majority of people following that faith. So the fact that you have a better understanding of the text means that you would be a more difficult person to argue with, but the average Christian does not understand the primary documents in the way that you do, and it's perfectly fair for somebody arguing against the average Christian to use the texts in the way they understand.
But I guess my point is, what is logical about trying to appeal to the masses rather than dealing with what the text actually is? In other words, if you are one who says that religion is not dealing with facts, it's not dealing with evidence, and then you're going to take an illogical approach, you're going to use fallacies of distraction and simply appeal to the people like evangelists do behind pulpits, what's the difference?
Well, the idea, even just talking about the texts as a direct, primary source criticism, it's begging the question a touch. From the atheist perspective, whether they're the original manuscripts read in the original language with a perfect understanding of the language, or they're the English language translations of it, either way, it's just something that was written by people a long time ago, and it's not to be assumed to be a divine or of a divine origin. So I guess the argument would need to be proven positive to the origin before we can work back the opposite direction.
Could I jump in here just a moment?
Sure. Go for it, John.
It seems to me that even if we lived in a world where there were no Islamic hypocrites, no Christian hypocrites, no Jewish hypocrites, if we lived in a world where every religious notion was embraced by people who did it very, very honestly and very genuinely, I think that there'd still be room for the argument that this is nonsense, and so that atheism can find these notions untenable. For it doesn't require that people be hypocritical. And I do think that in some sense that when people like Dawkins or Hitchens or when they do appeal to the dislike that people have for hypocrisy, I think they're playing an unwise card. And I think they could do far more to provoke thought in a useful way if they just dealt with the ideas themselves instead of these other things. But at the same time, we don't want to run away from the fact that hypocrisy is going to cost us, and we have to accept that cost as a part of the environment that we're working with.
Yeah, I think that. I definitely hear what you're saying, Greg, that a lot of atheists, Dawkins in particular, he's coming from the standpoint of saying, let's just deal with what you believe, typical Christian, and see if that makes sense at all. And I understand making that argument. And I don't personally think it's even an invalid argument. I think it's important to point out the fallacies of the things that people believe. But at the same time, I think it's also, it especially when it's done over and over and over again, it becomes, just kind of going after the weak sheep or grabbing for the low-hanging fruit. The masses are people who, the masses of Christianity are people who are highly uneducated, especially when it comes to what the texts actually, the texts of the Bible actually say and what they actually mean. They are coming from a standpoint of having been indoctrinated by the ideals of superstition rather than an objective view of what these texts actually say. They're not remotely coming from the original languages, etc. And that's a much as you said yourself, it's a much harder argument to make. It's very hard, I find, and I actually admire a lot of the questions that atheists ask. But it's true that it's very hard to argue with somebody who understands the texts in a more objective way. And so the question is, why wouldn't you make that argument? Why wouldn't you go after? Take Dawkins, for example. Why wouldn't he pursue making that argument instead of just continuing to argue from the standpoint of, I will just make foolish all of the masses? It seems like an easy way out, and instead of I respect Richard Dawkins very much. I haven't read his book, The Magic of Reality, yet, but I really was excited when I heard about it. I want a chance to read it. I think he's a fantastic biologist, and I think he's very thorough, and he's very he is very concerned with exploring biology in a deep way. But when he steps over into the field of religion, it seems like he's making the argument that is easy to make instead of really pursuing. I mean, when you argue with somebody who it's hard to argue with because they're trying as hard as you are to be objective, that's where you really start to learn the things that are important. Like when you and Bob talk, you made the comment, "I've never met a theist like you." Well, wouldn't you rather argue with a theist like Bob than a theist like Jimmy
like
at the
Joey.
Fundamental Baptist Church?
No, I'm kidding.
Well, do what?
Sure.
I said
like Joey.
rather than a theist like Joey. No,
Did I say Joey?
Right, who has no idea what he's talking
I think I said Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe at the Fundamental Baptist Church. But anyways, I'm just saying it strikes me that maybe Dawkins is more interested in making foolish than actually learning something in that field. That's just my opinion.
And let me jump in on what Joey is stating here, because we feel strongly about this. If I were to pick on science students who were not very good at being students, and I was trying to run my campaign based upon bashing those students that are poor, is that good? Is that ethical? And it seems like Dawkins spends more time trying to approach people who don't know what they're talking about than not. And the thing that I love about you, Greg, you're not looking for the guy that doesn't know anything about theology. What you're doing is you're dealing with Bob Graves. He knows his theology. And then you're going after people like Alan Darley. He knows what he's talking about. Whether it's right or wrong is superfluous to the point. You're going after people who are educated, people who know something about philosophy, theology, and the rest of that goes with the conversation. But that's not necessarily true with people like Dawkins, because they have the tendency to go after those people who are extremely weak in theology, and they make them simply look bad in the community. And my question would be to you, is that a good practice?
Well, I think there's a couple levels to that. I mean, when you talk about the picking off the low-hanging fruit or the weak ones, sure, it's easy. And particularly when you're writing a book, The God Delusion, and, say Christopher Hitchens with God Is Not Great, or Sam Harris with The End of Faith, are books that do aim a lot at the masses, and the masses are not educated. But it's important to recognize the motive behind that is not necessarily to encourage people to have a more honest theology, but to stop the harm and the damage that they're doing. Particularly Hitchens and Harris speak a lot about the Islamic world because there's a lot of bad things that happen in that region yet from Islam and poor understanding of it, or it doesn't matter one way or the other what is the source of it, whether it's even if they had a perfect understanding, if they're doing a lot of harm in the name of it, then the motive is to stop that. And appealing to theologians, theologians tend to be relatively nonviolent and frequently even pacifists. So it's hard to say, Dr. Jones, you are doing a terrible thing to the world by teaching people the right way to look at their faith stuff. I mean, it's a weaker argument when you look at it that way, but when you're saying, listen, you don't even know what you're talking about, and yet you're willing to kill people for it, that I think is the motive behind it. So you have to consider that. And why, when we look at the going after the weaker parts of the herd, that's when they're writing books or doing documentaries. But they also do very specifically engage in one-on-one debates. That's why I invited Alan to do that tonight.
That's why we are applauding you. I mean, we think that what you're doing is very much above board.
Sure.
And that speaks much of your integrity.
Can I just say
and
that, let's
get Bob Graves to jump in before we go too far, and then you can jump in. Go, Bob.
One of the things that I'm thinking is that I see religion as much a victim here as anything else. Mainly because, I mean, when it comes to, if you want to be a medical doctor, you can't just say, well, I'll set up my shingle and I'll start practicing medicine. To be a medical doctor, you have to get an education. If you're going to be a psychologist, you have to get state licensing. You have to have certain, you have to go through a process that will determine whether or not you possess the skills, abilities, ethics, etc. But if you're going to be a believer, you just have to be a human being. There are no prerequisites to this. And as a result, it is the ideas and the notions that people believe are thereby also representing a wide spectrum of people who haven't got a clue how to think and other people who think quite clearly. And I think that because of that, there is this erroneous view. For example, someone might ask me, should we pass a law that makes religion, a religious view of sacrifice illegal? And I say, absolutely not. It's good enough that we have a law that murder is illegal. And the truth is, I don't see how being religious is in any manner relevant to the horrible violence that people are doing. In fact, I think objecting to the religion becomes a distraction. If you're killing people, and let's hold people accountable for what they do in their behavior. I could care less what the reason is they use to justify it. Well, I might be concerned about it if I'm going to decide what we do once we found them guilty. But at the same time, I really think that, if people are doing horrible things in the name of religion, I don't care that they're doing it horribly in the name of religion. I care that they're doing horrible things, and we need to address their behavior. One of the things I've discovered in dealing with my children, also dealing with students, is I'm going to lose the argument if I allow the reason a student or my children have done something to enter into the discussion. I need to hold them accountable for what they did, what they didn't do, and that's it, period. And if I don't move from that, I will end up being far more effective. And I think that if we really want to address the horrible harm that's being done in the name of religion, let's just address the horrible harm that's being done.
Yeah.
That's a reactionary standpoint. I absolutely agree that you need to address the harm being done by it now, but you also do need to look at the source and see what you can do proactively to prevent it from being done in the future. If there's somebody teaching people that hurting people is good to do, or say the practice of honor killings, it's a very well-known, very considered righteous and honorable. in several parts of the world, and it's because there's an adulterated concept of what honor means in the culture that they will murder a woman who was raped or who was found to have engaged in intercourse outside of a marital relationship. I mean, there was a story just the other day in the news, I believe, of a Islamic woman stoned to death because she was raped and didn't have 5 male witnesses to say that she was indeed raped. And it's a cultural and a I guess a mimetic cause. So if we don't fight against the cause of it,
well, no, I don't think that's the cause of it. And I think if you fight that, you're going to end up being so terribly ineffective because they're not going to let you tear down their culture. They're not going to let you tear down their religion, even if they should.
What is the cause then, Bob? If the cause isn't their viewpoint of, I mean, to me, religion is a big part of your viewpoint of the world around you and how you should conduct yourselves in it. So if that isn't the cause, then what is?
I think the cause of violence to another person is nothing more complex than the idea that if I'm violent here, I stand to gain something that I don't gain without being violent, and I'm okay with that. And religion is just the context in which it occurs. People kill because of the lust of their heart. They kill because of the violence of their heart. They do these things because they choose to, and they value the outcome of it in a way they imagine in the illusion of their mind that this leaves them better off. And I think if you got rid of all the religion in the world, you would not do it. A single thing to end the violence. They just switch to some other way of justifying the things they want to do. I don't see it as a cause at all. It's the modality through which it operates. Period.
Bob, what is the cure here?
Love. Love is the only cure, and that's not an easy thing to inoculate people with. People don't love usually until they've been loved, when they felt unlovely in a way that effectively helped them to feel lovely. Love is the only cure. Lack of love is the only problem.
I think that's a powerful argument, but I have a huge objection that I want to voice, and that is that while we've been talking, the chat room has been doing nothing but talking about my legs, and I don't think that's appropriate, and I think that our audience has problems, and I don't know, I think that we do need to talk about the cause of that and address it at its heart, so it can stop right now. We need to have some intelligent discussion in the chat room, people. It's not good at all.
They've been severely
picking some low fruit there, are we, Joey?
Do what?
So you're suggesting that people are paying more attention to your legs than the substance that's being dealt with?
That's what seems to be happening, and it's not. You know, our crowd, they've got some issues.
You know, once again, I want to applaud you, Greg, because I think that you're being more honest than any atheist that I've ever known. That is, you're trying to deal with people who know something about theology and the text, and I applaud that. And I don't think that you're trying to gain fame by discrediting those people who don't understand theology. However, I agree with you when it comes to those people who can't be honest enough to say, yeah, infanticide, that's wrong. About genocide, that's wrong. I understand why, in a sense, that Christopher Hitchens has gone after those particular kinds of scenarios in theology. You know, when it comes to Elisha, you know, cursing 42 children for calling him baldy and then God sending bears out to kill the children. You know, I have a real problem with that. At the same time, people in theology, if you ask them the point-blank question, do you think this is moral? Simply because most theists have this sacred cow, and they're afraid of it, to be honest with you. They're afraid to say that this is immoral. They're afraid of that simply because of lack of education. And I think that was the very point that Bob was making earlier.
They're also afraid to say it to you because sometimes, unfortunately, when you become entangled in an organization, it's going to cost you your job, even if you have the intelligence to know there's some real problems with this. You can't say that if you're in an organization that requires you to believe that the Bible is the inerrant, absolute Word of God. And not just that, but the particular bend on it is the correct one. By the way, I think David Hayward had one of those cartoons that had this big chart of all these tributaries and breakups, and then basically they're showing the evolution of all the different Christian movements and how this one broke off from that and this one broke, and then finally the guy's pointing on the chart to this one little twig on it. He says, "And here's where we finally got the Bible right." It's crazy stuff.
I keep telling people that linguists, and I'm talking about most of the linguists that I know of who are theists, they don't even claim that we should even have a canon.
Right.
And yet most people today in theology, they think we need a canon. Most theists who are actually linguists, they would not tell you that they know that most of these manuscripts say X, Y, or Z. They will simply say the reconstruction process has not been completed, and we can tell very little about these manuscripts. And so when you talk to people who are educated, they're not going to commit to that much simply because they are practicing linguistic science. They are practicing something I think that is something that I think that Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens would applaud if they would ever look into it. And unfortunately, Christopher Hitchens is wonderful of a guy he was. I wish that he was still with us, but he did a marvelous job in his lifetime. I love him very much. But I'm simply saying that there's something not happening here that needs to come together, but it's not happening. And can you speak to that, Greg?
Well, there's a few parts of that could change. Sorry, I'm getting an echo. Is anybody else, or is that just on my end?
Nope.
If you need to pull your earpiece out while you're talking, Skype will probably work that issue out for you momentarily.
Okay. It actually looks like it's better already. But I can say that it's, first of all, when you're dealing with somebody that knows what they're talking about on the theistic side point, it tends that a lot of the theological arguments that are traditionally used, or a lot of the structure of the faith melts away, and it can be frustrating. It's even dealing with Bob as the unconventional pastor is occasionally like trying to nail Jello to a wall. There's so little of firm, yes, this is what I am saying, and it's very difficult to criticize or to critique, not criticize, but to critique a statement that's not really a statement, but more of a question, or a hyperbole, or so it can be difficult in that respect to even be intelligible by the audience, and to go on from there. But the other part of it is, I have to admit my relative ignorance to not only the level of knowledge that you have about the text, but to even textual criticism itself. I mean, I have a layperson's understanding, and to be honest, almost all of my understanding is from personal study. I'm hoping within a few years I can have more, but I'll not have the background that you do and the doctorate behind it, the research and everything. And when you want to talk about clashes between experts in the field, it would be very difficult for Richard Dawkins to understand the textual criticisms to the level that you have without having a manifesto from you. And I know you've said in the past that you were working on writing something. When you do, I would be happy to take that on personally. I'll go on record right now. I will read your book, and I will come up with a critique for it if Richard Dawkins won't. If he will, I'm going to let him have that one. But
Well, anything that I will, and I will be publishing soon, that would be next year, everything that I have to present is simply going to be a workable model. It's not what most theists want. Most theists are looking for something that they would call absolute. They're looking for something that they can actually park their minds into. Fixed beliefs are something that I don't know, they really disturb me, and I'm interested in the process, and I hope to offer the community of those who want to explore what theism actually is. I hope to offer them something that they can work on and work with, and possibly everything that I might offer might be wrong, and I'm fine with that. And I'm just wanting a process to continue, because I think that we have to build, and it takes time to build, and you're not going to get everything done in one lifetime. It takes many lifetimes. It takes many scholars from various areas, and we have to trust various other scholars in various disciplines. With that said, I would like to ask Bob a question just to clear up some issues. And yet at the same time, I want to make a comment to you at the same time in this question, Greg. If Richard Dawkins met with Bob Graves and started talking with Bob Graves like you have, do you think that his confrontation would be similar to yours, Greg?
I don't. I think he has a far more adversarial style. He tends to be a bit on the dismissive side as well. I can understand a degree of that when you come into, like I said, there tends to be very repetitive arguments, and there comes a point when, like for example, as a biologist, I have explained in great detail the inner workings of how evolution works to people, and spent, I spent several years in college studying this subject, and I've done research on it. So, I'm an expert on this. And when people come to me and say, well, if evolution is real, how come there's still monkeys around? There are people who evolved from monkeys. Why are there still monkeys around? I mean, it's hard to not just facepalm at that. You get that, and you're like, I don't have time for this. I'm
Greg,
sorry.
the correct response to that question is perhaps you can speak personally on that issue.
Well, some of us have evolved.
I feel your pain, Greg. I really do. One of the embarrassing things about being a theist is being associated with people who can be so critical of the scientific community and some of the insights of biology, physics, and geology, and they don't even have any. There's hardly anything you can say to them because they don't even know that they don't know what they're talking about. And so, I feel your pain because that's why, even though I am a theist, I absolutely admire and enjoy and believe in the concept and the dynamic of evolution. I think it's a demonstrated idea, whether it's certainly not a science that is all done, and know what science is. And I don't expect that of it. But, I hear exactly what you're saying, and it's embarrassing to me when I see that kind of thing happening. And if you do face palm yourself, they will feel like they stumped you.
Bob,
they're declaring victory in that moment.
I was asking a question just a few minutes ago, and I directed it at you, yet I brought Greg into play there. But let me see if I can finish this. And I think that you're bringing up some wonderful words that would nuance my point. Embarrassment. What is there about the theological community, and I'm talking about theological seminaries in general, What is there about theological seminaries that is an embarrassment to you?
Oh, wow. Well, you know, the fact that the end is contained in the beginning, they are not interested in turning out people who struggle with the question of God. They're rather interested in people who learn how to sit into this cookie cutter so that when they leave, they are now champions of the view of the seminary. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to mass produce themselves. And to me, you know, it seems to me that real spirituality, real belief in God, recognizes that we're talking about something here that is fundamentally mysterious. And if you can't let people make sense of this in whatever best way they can, totally independently, totally freely, even if it means they're going off the wild end a little bit or too much or whatever, if you can't let that process go, I don't know what you're doing. And so I don't understand the wisdom or insight behind that kind of an approach, where people are not allowed to truly be, in a thought process of struggling. Instead, they got to be people who already know, are well trained in this and that, and they're not really taught how to think. It's now I'm a professor in a secular school, and if I had an engineering student in the sound engineering area who was not prepared to learn how to think about sound, I don't want people in there who just, well, you turn this dial, if this is feeding back, you look here and there. Now, yeah, there are some procedures and processes that you can go through, but I want people who understand sound, who think about sound, who maybe even have questions about what it is we say about sound.
Exactly.
And these are the people who are going to become excellent sound engineers,
Right. Greg, I can say this, and this really is sad. I have so many professors who have called, who have written me and even visited with me personally, who are so tired of the process. That is this thing that Bob is referring to. There is so many things in theology that is so wrong. For instance, if you go to Seminary A, you're going to have to be a parrot. They're not going to train you to be a thinker. And so you parrot their theology if you want to graduate. And so if you want your THD out of that particular seminary, you're going to have to parrot your way through that school. And that's true of almost every seminary in the nation. And this doesn't speak well about our educational institutions, that is, in the context of theology. And I think that Bob would applaud this. I think that entire paradigm needs to change quickly.
It's fake education. It's fake education.
I agree.
It's not.
I agree. And I think that Richard Dawkins, at the same time I disagree with some of his methods, I think that some of the questions that he's posing and putting on the table of discussion, I think that he's really scrutinizing enough to where people who want an education are leaving the theological institutions and going into what theists call the secular world, and I applaud that because you can actually get adequate training there.
Mm-hmm. Can I mention one more thing here?
Yeah, go for it.
This
is your night, by the way. You guys need to speak when you want and input everything, because tonight is all about promoting you guys, because I want you to know that I speak not just for myself, but for my wife and the crew here. I mean, we love you guys. We love your honesty. We love your intellect. And I want you, Greg, to understand that, yes, I'm a linguist, but yet at the same time, I'm not a biologist. And so I don't mind being your student. I'm learning a lot. And so please understand there is a submissive side of me that loves to submit to people who know things that I don't. And that's the thing that I love about discussions. I can learn from Alan Darley. I don't agree with all of his theology, but sometimes he puts things in a way that makes me think, and I love that. Go for it, Bob.
I hate to be specific, but I think it might be helpful to be specific. My first experience was in college was going to Bob Jones University, and there's a very determined sense of the point of view that they have. And I studied Old Testament. I looked at the New Testament. We looked at a variety of ideas. I had one class that seemed to be mostly about making sure we understand everything evil about Billy Graham. But I found that later when I finally went to Binghamton University, a secular school, I found a level of demand, a level of education, a level of inquiry, a level of peer review that was amazingly admirable. And I couldn't find much like that unless you say, go to some, it was just a totally different world. And of course, at Binghamton University, where there was a great deal more freedom, I could take a view very different from the professor, and that might actually please the professor to do that. And I only had one professor at SUNY Binghamton who was teaching a course in the anthropology department that was just it was actually a pre-med course, who actually had some dismissive things that he said during the course that reminded me of my BJU days. And I thought, this guy's, although a lot of his class was excellent, I just felt like I got away from this stuff, and I really wanted an education that was going to be a challenge to me, and that begged of me to raise the bar. And I've had the experience of teaching in a Christian college as well. I don't want to get specific about that, but I found that many times the rigor that I could demand of the students just was not that great, and I felt that it was a part of that mentality where the school, in their mission, was about creating a cookie cutter factory, and it was disappointing, because the truth is, I'm a theist. I'm still a believer.
Hey, Bob.
I don't see. Yeah.
Bob, sorry to cut you off. We need to take just a momentary break, not from the show, but we have a special call that can't wait.
Awesome.
And we're going to go ahead and take it. This is from Craig.
Right. Bob, I talked to you on the phone about this.
Yeah.
This was from a gentleman who is incarcerated right now. And I talked also with you, Greg, about him calling tonight. And he's calling, and he wants to share some things with us. And I would like for you guys to state some things. And unfortunately, Joey tried doing this on the phone that we use to do all of this, and it did not work efficiently. And so this is going to be something that we may have to use a lot of repetition. Can you hear me, Craig?
Yes, sir. I can hear just fine.
Okay, now I'm going to put this up to the microphone, and I want you to say hello to
Doesn't sound like he's on speaker.
the crowd. And we have Bob Graves. He's a professor in New York State. He works at a particular college up there. He's a wonderful individual. And also Greg Bray is on the show tonight. He's a biologist. And so we have various people tonight along with Joey and myself. And so we just want to welcome you to the show.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It's good speaking with everyone. I hope you can all hear me real good.
Can hear you
I can hear
fine.
you fine.
Yeah. We're going to have to keep this short tonight simply because the technical problems that we're going through. But I wanted to speak about, and I asked these guys to speak about it, and you're probably not going to be able to hear what they're saying, but I'm wanting so bad to talk about this issue, and we've talked about it many times before, and that's the point that so many people are incarcerated, and when they get out, they have no hope outside, or that is on the outside, and they're going to return to the institution because institutional living almost becomes their way of life.
exactly. Well, Dr. Jones, I talked to my friend Willie in here, and we spoke about it a lot. And I was wondering if you could speak with him and let him speak to you guys.
Well,
Can we do that?
if I,
He's right here, and like I said, I talked to him about it last week, and I said, same question you've asked me before. I said, he knows a lot more about this than I, you know.
okay,
And I think he'd be more knowledgeable for you. Can you speak? Can you let him speak?
sure, he
I ask him the same thing you just asked me.
okay,
All right.
I'll do
His
that.
name is Willie.
Okay,
all right.
thank you.
All right, Willie, this is Dr. Jones. Hello, how you doing?
How are you doing, Willie? Welcome to our show. It's called The Place, and here we are interested in intellectual honesty, spiritual honesty, and scriptural honesty. We have various guests on our program right now, but one of the things that I'd like to talk to you about, just in brief, and you're possibly not going to be able to hear the answers from our guest on our show, simply because we did not get this particular phone hooked up to our system. But the question that I have has to do with those people who actually are incarcerated. Is it true that many of them are there, and when they get out, they will feel so uncomfortable, that is, on the outside, that they will actually return back into institutional style living because they're more comfortable there? Is that true?
In some cases, maybe, but in a lot of other cases, no. You're here in Pensacola, aren't you?
He's we're in Pensacola, right?
Right. We are here in Pensacola. Yes, sir.
Well, the situation here in Pensacola, a lot of people, they can't find the jobs that they want. So, there's a big problem with the sale of drugs and stuff going on here. So, guys can't find jobs, so they turn to drugs and stuff like that. But some of the people that come to jail for a lot of little misdemeanor charges, I could, in some cases, you could say that, it's true. But in other cases, no.
What can we as individuals on the outside do for you guys who are on the inside to help to give you a better world, that is, for when you get out?
I remember once I did some time in prison, and when I got out, they had some programs set up. They had a program for rehab, and what they did, they had programs, to introduce you back into the walk of life, and to help you with finances and a place to stay, and even clothes and stuff for a job. If you found a job, they would help you get the uniform and boots and stuff, tools also too. So programs like that that kind of help people, gradually work their way back into life, because some people get out of here and they get out of here like they release them at 12 o'clock at night. And a lot of these guys have to walk. Some of them don't have any family or anything, and then they go right back out there. And they start doing the same things over and over. There's nothing out there really for them.
Right. Well, I do appreciate you calling, and we're going to address this on our show tonight, and I wanted to state to you that we certainly do love you, and we're going to have something next week. I'd like for you and Craig to be on our show next week. We're going to have our technology, the technical part of this fixed by next week, and I would like to talk to you so we can have this conversation, because I'm simply holding my cell phone up to my microphone and it's not working very well.
Okay.
And so we're going to just keep this conversation short tonight. Tell Craig how much we love him, and I'd like to talk with him this week, and maybe you guys can come back next week. But we're going to address some of this tonight after we hang up, but just wanted to express how much we love you.
Okay. Thank you for having us on, and just keep us in your prayers.
We will. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Let me state this, and it certainly did chop off something that you were stating, Bob, that's so wonderful, and I want to go back there. But just for about 5 minutes, let's wrestle with this subject. My wife and I have been very active in trying to help those who have been incarcerated. We have taken people in who have been incarcerated, for instance, for over 20 years. And all of the people that we have taken in over the years, which would be many, we have seen something that's common. We find, for instance, when most of these people get out of prison, they feel very uncomfortable. It takes months before they can even eat with you sometimes. To enjoy maybe Christmas, they will stand maybe in the other room because they feel so uncomfortable. They don't feel normal. They don't feel like human beings. And my wife and I, we have such a heart for these people. We want to help them, and we're convinced that we don't know how to do this completely. And I feel like we are not educated enough. We don't know enough about it. We have the compassion. We want to do something, and we wanted both of you guys to share your thoughts and your hearts on how we can help those people who really want help. That is, when they get out of prison, so they can actually have a better life. What would you have to say? Let's start with you, Bob.
Well, it's certainly, as you know, a huge problem, and it is sometimes dealt with in a manner where, similar to what we were talking about before, when atheists and theists are having discussions, but they really are not that well educated. It can fall apart in terms of a good discussion. When it comes to when people are getting out of prison, their bodies are coming out of prison, but I think that sometimes we don't understand the depth to which the culture of prison that they were in some sense even a part of before they ended up in prison. The fact that they were at least involved enough in the criminal element that they could be accused of and found guilty of a crime, even if they weren't particularly guilty of the crime that sent them in. Their connection to this, or in some, no doubt, many innocent people end up there. But by the time a person comes out of prison, their sense of self has been distorted. Their sense of the world has been distorted.
That's true.
And they live in all of these lies, and they don't know that they are lies. And they can't make the adjustments well simply by going through the motions that, look, we can get you some clothing, we can get you a job. They're going to have to go through, I think, a radical redevelopment of wrestling with those lies. But then on top of that, they're also going to have to deal with a world that isn't really ready to trust them, deal with them, work with them. And so they have to deal with the fact that people, for both good and bad reasons, are not yet ready to trust them. And so what a tremendous challenge they're up against. But I do think that chances are any successful program to prevent the recidivism is going to have to find a way of helping these people rebuild themselves, as well as rebuild their sense of interaction with the culture, perhaps in some form of halfway house that involves that process of relearning, but also gives them a context in which they can bypass some of the way that they're not going to be entirely trusted. I'm not a strong believer in our current criminal justice system. It's not that I don't want to put deal with criminals. It's that I don't think I think we tend to deal with criminals in a way that where we are vengeful, not redemptive. And it's not as if it's not like I'm saying, well, yeah, you commit a crime and we'll just take care of you, But that's not the point. But people who have stooped already low enough to think that committing a crime makes sense are already people who've got a serious problem going on. Do we want to find a way of curing this problem, or do we just want to lash back at them? Because lashing back at them, as much as we may want to do that, and as much as there may be a need for justice and all that, it only, you're sending them basically to crime tech. These people have a serious problem that they're dealing with, but also this is a serious problem for our culture, I think. So it's what a huge problem. But rebuilding themselves, I think, is the key. I mean, because you're not going to overcome all those things, but if they can overcome the lies they have learned about the world, the lies they've learned about themselves, come to believe in themselves, come to accept responsibility for the goal, the task that's ahead of them, you're going to do far better. Other than that, it's perhaps too general, but that's my first thoughts on that.
Yeah, wow. That's wonderful. I love those words. They're so compassionate. Your heart's big. Greg.
Well, you're going to have to forgive me, and I guess doubly forgive me for using the term, but forgive me for pontificating for a moment here. As a devangelist, I'm also, I view that as a calling. My wife calls it a hobby. Me doing this show, she tends to diminish a touch, but I look at it as something that's very, very important to me, and I see that in many aspects of life, not just the religious forum. I believe very strongly in social activism, and I think that Bob made a fantastic point in that there's something wrong with the culture. Even just the fact that we refer to those incarcerated as criminals, as if that is a type of person that they are.
Right.
And in reality, they're people that have done something that has been deemed criminal. And if you look at what has been done, there are so many different social forces and aspects behind it that are related. I mean, drug crimes in and of themselves are, unless it's an aggressive crime, they're not. They're victimless in a way. The victim, of course, of a drug crime is the person themselves, but the solution to that is not locking that person away. It's to assist that person get beyond their addictions, get beyond their things. So what you're doing with these people when they get out is a fantastic thing to do because they need it. And they need it because of what happens to them when they're within. And I think that one thing that we can do, given the fact that we have the forum that we do, which is something that most people don't, is to make it a mission to fight for and not to get political, I guess, on a religious show that could have, but to fight for a better prison system, a rehabilitative prison system, where instead of getting an hour of exercise out in the yard a day and 3 meals where they get to socialize a little bit, and have an opportunity for them to learn real, true life job skills. If we're already spending $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year to house these people, what's an extra $5,000 a year to give them an education or to give them some true life skills? And then beyond that, when they get out, Willie made the point that when they get out, they have a label. They're a felon, and they can't get a job. So another thing that we can do is anybody. I mean, I know many small business owners that have made it a personal mission to hire people that can't be hired in other places because of things like that, and they're just not offered jobs. So what you and Monica are doing is a fantastic service to those people. But I think what you can do even better than what you do now, or in your home, is what you're doing on your show, talking about these issues, making these issues known, and encouraging those that listen to do something about it. Writing letters, doing something supportive, hiring people if you're in the situation to hire, giving people a chance to get past it. Because Willie was absolutely right. If you get out with a drug crime on your record, your option is sell drugs or starve in a lot of situations.
That's true. That's true. One of the things that really touches me when I talk to most of these guys, they always use more times than not, I should say, Christianese. They will say, "Pray for me." And years ago, when I was a very dogmatic theist, I thought they wanted me to pray for them. But now I have come to know how these people think, in a sense. And when they ask you to pray for them, what they're actually asking for is, please care for me. And they're looking for some compassion. And I think Bob stated it wisely. You know, the cure that we need is love. And it really doesn't have the stamp God on it. It just says, it's just love. And that's powerful. These people are looking for people who are concerned. They get institutionalized. They find their comfort. And in a sense, they become addicted to being there. And so when they are just put out on the streets after they've served their time, they don't feel like human beings, because, you know, that was taken away from them in prison. And these people have so many stories about how they are treated. We have one of our crew members actually in Texas, and he's a prison guard. And all the things that he tells me all the time about how prison guards treat prisoners, we're talking about crime after crime after crime against these prisoners. And these guys can't do anything about it. And they need our love and our compassion. They need education. They need someone caring for them. And that's what's going to change them.
I think it's also vital. When you read something like Man's Search for Meaning by, was it Viktor Frankl? I can't think. I'm not thinking tonight. When you read that, his recognition that his response to things is his choice. What does he do in a concentration camp? But to me, I think one of the things that's absolutely vital is that they have to learn who they are, and they need to know that when they're loved, it's not just because, well, we're nice people and we love you because we're nice. They need to know we love you because we find the loveliness that is you something we resonate with. They need to know they are worth it. They need to know that they are lovely. They need to get on the other side of these lives, and if they can do that, even some of the other things that we can't do for them or fail to do for them, they will then be in a far better position to do that for themselves. I really see the bottom line here is their sense of self has got to be redeemed.
We're sitting here having this conversation with you, Bob, as a theist, and Greg as an atheist. And yet I really can't see anything different about either one of you in this sense. Both of you guys have extreme love and compassion for humanity. And sometimes I think that we use the term atheist and theist in a sense that it keeps us divided. And sometimes I think it would be better to say, wow, this is just Greg, this is just Bob, let's talk. I'm seeing something.
I don't allow that. I'm sorry. If I'm not labeled as an atheist, I'm not there. That was a joke. I'm sorry.
Greg, your humor is drier than the Las Vegas desert.
Hey. Oh, how quick do you want Joey to get started on that cartoon, Greg?
Make sure
I had a British guy on the show. I had to go dry humor today. That's it's like a rule.
What? Say that again?
I said I had a British guy on the show today. I had to go with dry humor.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like a rule.
Yeah, that's my favorite kind of humor. I like to bury my jokes so deep that people have to dig to figure out whether I'm serious or not.
Before the phone call, Bob, you were telling us your thoughts concerning seminaries. Can you take up where you left off?
Before we do that, I wanted to make one quick mention, going back to the prisoners, is that Bob mentioned earlier, the same is true with preachers. A lot of people who have gone through these seminaries and have been indoctrinated is probably the best term for or what happened to them in them, they have had the opportunity to do nothing but what they've been trained to do. And it's very similar to the institutionalization that happened in prison. They've lived this life. They have absolutely no other option. And there actually is an organization for that specific thing. Preachers, I don't remember the name of it. I tried looking it up, but I don't want to overuse the internet while I'm streaming here. But there's an organization exactly for that reason, for ministers, preachers, priests that have lost their faith or have lost their faith in that particular denomination at the minimum, looking to leave the church and do something differently. And I think that is incredible. And the same sort of an organization, again, something grander than yourself, is probably something that we as an organization, as the New Covenant Group, could even work on creating a network for these people to have something more, an assistance program for them when they come out. And I think that would be a fantastic opportunity for them, in the same way that the people have done that for preachers in a situation where they're leaving their institution. So, sorry, that was my last little pontification.
Hey, anytime that you want to interrupt me and show compassion, go for it. Bob.
Well, the call was so arresting. I don't even recall now exactly what it was I was talking about. I know I certainly had made the comment that it's a fake education. That I also talked a bit about how I noticed a huge difference in the rigor of the secular education I received from the experience I had earlier at a Christian college. And even in my teaching experience, I found that it's just the cookie cutter mentality is not, it isn't even using personalities that have a student personality. I mean, a student is somebody who's really a student is they want to know things and they have questions and they're looking for ahas. They're looking for coherence, not just formulas and ideas. That they can just then run with. And I think, this is true no matter what your field of study is. Greg didn't become a biologist by just, going there and having them teach him at school everything he needs to know, A, B, C, D. He had to ask a lot of questions. He had to do a lot of experiments, had to look in the microscope. He had to do things that actually led him down a path where he wasn't sure where it was going to end up until he got there. Just education requires. Now, I don't recall exactly what I was saying when the call came in, but if anybody remembers that, I can continue from there if it's important. But I think we're in a sad state of affairs when it comes to our institutionalizing of religion. It's to me, it's sad, it's worthless, and it's creating people that you can't even really talk to because they're talking at you. And it's just a sad state of affairs.
Do you think that theological seminaries are fixable in their current state?
I think I picture that Jesus entering them with a whip and chasing the professors out. I agree. Don't know. They'd have to accept a process that understands human development and the way we come to understand and believe the things we come to understand and believe is not by being told what to believe, but by being brought through a process of discovery and critical thinking, and with a certain degree of freedom that allows us to then end up anywhere we end up without regard to where our professor was hoping we would.
Right.
I just don't see any way other than that. They're going to have to lose that false standard.
Greg, I really appreciated your statements concerning preachers a few minutes ago. One of the things that I've experienced in my lifetime is training various ministers, students, etc., in many different kinds of environments, seminaries, etc. And one of the things that really has been arresting in my mind has been when you sit down and you start dealing with the evidence of what you actually have. People, when they start looking at that, sometimes they just lose their faith because it's not what the church has advocated or stated over the years. And after various ministers that I have known personally have looked at the evidence, they simply took the evidence and did lots of hyperbole with the evidence and now are preaching simply a different sermon. And it's just as bad what they're doing now after having looked at the evidence as what they were doing prior to. How can we stop that, Bob?
I think that it comes down to style rather than content. Education is not about, do you know this? Do you know that? And then once you discover that, well, this isn't true, but that is, if you just take your style over to the new core truths, it's the same song in another key. I really think that this is a matter of style, to teach people to be open, to teach people to be exploratory. I recommend this thing I call multi-axialism, where we try to understand something in a manner that is coherent, but we're not satisfied with just understanding something in a way we find coherent. Chances are anything we find coherent is coherent not because it actually is, but because it's coherent with our capacity to think about it critically. So what we want to do, once we get to that point where we understand something, we want to get to the point where we understand how somebody else understands it and can appreciate how it's possible for a genuine, intelligent person to understand it that way and do it non-judgmentally and end up collecting a whole collection of different ways of understanding something until we can really say, I see these as relative points of view that each have strength and weakness, and I allow myself to live in that conundrum. I think that this is, in some sense, the real exploration of a style of education that does not have a particular ending point as its goal. Rather, it has this style of approach, of inquiry, of question, of mystery, and of wonderment, and a desire to just let this go wherever it does. That style is what needs to change, rather than, the style of, okay, I got these answers. Oops, whoop, wrong answers. Okay, now I got these answers. It just doesn't work for me that way, personally.
I just want to quickly catch up on some of the comments that we've had in our chat room. I'm not going to go way back. There have been some comments that have been placed that are just too far back to catch up on. But my wife, Monica, actually said to you, Bob, she said, well said. And this is in regard to your comment about seminary. She said, not thinkers, but rather just someone who can spout out what they are told. And then somebody from our Texas studio laughed at your jokes, Greg.
Got at least one. All right.
And then a Greg Bray wrote smiley face. Are you writing comments to yourself, Greg?
I laughed at my own joke. Is that a problem? I have a case of the self-laughing.
All right.
I think this is a good point in the show to shift gears. We've got approximately 20 minutes left. I want to talk about what is going to happen in the next few months on our shows here at our network called The Place. I would like to tell you this. I have been in conversations with various people. One of the individuals who will be coming our way between now and January is Carlton Pearson. He is known as Bishop Carlton Pearson to most people, and he became famous in religious circles, and then he stepped out of that mindset of religion that believed in hell, and
it was a bold move. I
Oh,
mean, he
it
was
was-
extremely
it was challenging.
famous. Most people with half of his audience would never have made a move like
No.
that.
I mean,
Yeah, he's an Oral Roberts graduate, right?
Yeah,
which would-
correct.
And an
it's
Oral
just not
Roberts star. I mean, he was on his
Right.
way up when he made this move.
One of the things that that's going to happen when he comes, he wants to come here to Pensacola to do a live show with us. And we have several people of that stature who are coming also. We have, I'm talking right now with Bart Ehrman. I think that you probably know of him, Greg. He's made many statements that the atheists are taking and trying to really advocate a lot of his speeches.
Isn't he an atheist?
I think he's more or less an agnostic. He was, more or less on top of it all.
Yeah, I
in
listened to
Protestantism.
a couple of his lectures and really enjoyed them.
Oh, good man. But we have various guests that are, who are very, very wonderful people. But my point is, one of the things that we wanted to do with this 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock hours to break it up and make it much variegated. And I was glad that you were able to get Alan Darley to commit to a debate, because one of the things that we want to do with our shows here, we want to bring people together and allow them to see that we are coming together because we're concerned about each other, but not just concerned, but we want to listen to each other. And so I'm excited about the next few months and the next few years about the potentials that we have, and I wanted you guys to express some ideas that you guys had to our audience tonight about your ideas concerning your show and how the New Covenant Group is putting things together. And so I'm going to let you guys speak, and I'll chime in from time to time for the next 20 minutes.
No pressure. No pressure, guys.
No pressure.
Can I kick this one off?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Well, I wanted to say right away that the debate with Alan is something I'm very excited about. I did want to say debates are something that I have done more than I can count online written debates. I've had conversations with friends and with strangers, having an audience to some extent, and done this show. But I have never in my entire life done a formal moderated debate. It is a format that I'm relatively ignorant to, so I will be studying up on that. I'm really excited for it, and I just wanted to qualify ahead of time if I end up looking foolish, which I really doubt, but I'm confident to the point of arrogance sometimes, which is why I challenged him to this debate, having never done it before. But I really like that. But the things that I would like to see with the show is viewer participation, both in the show and outside of the show. I want to know what people want to know about, what they want to talk about, who they'd like to see, guests that people might recommend. I'm happy. As I said, I'm confident to the point of arrogance. If you want to take something completely off the wall and have somebody come on that would, I have no level of ambition too high for me to try to pull somebody into the show or do it needs to be done. I'll likely fail, but that's okay. It's something that I'd love to try. So I just want to know what the viewers would like to see from my show, and anybody that it happens to have any connections for anybody with a name or with a following or anything of that nature, that or even anybody who's just making interesting conversation that you think would be a fantastic addition to the show, please get them in contact with us. Let us know who you'd like to see and what you'd like to see, because I'm new to this. I've only started doing this show when this show came on the air. I haven't been blogging about
What
it
is
and bringing on
12?
guests for
Yeah.
years. So, your help would be appreciated to the audience.
Bob.
Well, yeah, very similar comments from me as well. I'm not interested in doing a show just to kind of have a show to, be a celebrity, as it were. If the show can't speak to people where they are and find them and then leave them in a manner where they found it, they have gained from it, then it's just not worth doing. And of course, that's impossible for me to do without their feedback. I got a lot of feedback on the show that I did when I talked about the notion that I reject, that human beings are born as sinners. I rejected that teaching, which is very common. And then I got so many comments on it that I continued it. And I did it the following week. But there were enough comments that I also was asked to connect it with my concept of the indwelling Christ and I thought that was a perfect contrast, even if the person who asked the question wasn't thinking that way. To me, those shows were meaningful to me, not just because, hey, I get to talk and get to teach things I believe, but I felt as though I was talking to people who had interest and concern. So if people could be, very active in sending me questions, even they don't have to wait for the show. Just send me questions. I've got a few messages on Facebook already from people who've asked me to talk about this issue, talk about that issue, and that would be very, very helpful. The other thing I've asked for, and I haven't received it yet, I've asked for people to actually, if they want to, make their comments or questions on video and let me know where I can find the video, and we'll actually use the video on the show.
That would be fantastic for either of our shows.
Yeah, right. And so, but at the same time, if people have different ideas or suggestions of what I would do differently, that would be very helpful. Currently on Sundays, I tend to speak to people who are examples of those who have gone through various paradigm shifts where their faith today isn't quite like what it was before because they've had to encounter a sense of honesty. And then on Wednesday, I tend to teach on things that help people understand how I ended up with this reputation of being unconventional. And I'm doing that not just to demonstrate my unconventionality, but to try to help other people see the issues that forced me in honesty to betray the traditions that I used to be loyal to. And so if people have ideas or questions, about, well, what do you deal with this issue? That would be so helpful. And then as Greg even mentioned, I don't know everybody in the world. And I certainly don't know people, everyone out there who would be an excellent example to talk about of a person whose shifts and changes has led them down a different path. And I'd like to know who these people are and be able to invite them on as a guest. And other than that, let me be in a position of letting you know how lovely you are and encourage me in any way that you find meaningful. I enjoy the show. It's been for me I left the ministry with great disappointment, and in some ways I feel like I'm doing things that are important, that were the reason why I went into ministry in the first place, and to me that's just a personally meaningful thing. It is in another sense a sense of purpose that my life finds, and so it's just been great for me to be able to do this. So help me out and send me questions, comments, and ideas.
The thing that keeps, it's just so evident, is that both of you guys have such extreme love for people, concern. Both of you guys are extremely compassionate, and I hope that our audience really can appreciate how we're bringing atheists and theists together, because there are thousands of wonderful atheists and thousands of wonderful theists, and they can come together and create a better world, and things can change for the better if we come together, doing things individually without anyone else and never talking to anyone else. That's not going to accomplish much. But when we start gathering, coming together, pooling our resources and doing something like that, I think that things can change for the better, possibly in our lifetime. And so I'm encouraging people to gather and contact your friends on Facebook and let people know about these two wonderful, wonderful hosts who have these two shows. We're going to keep supporting them much in every way. Hopefully they will want to take it to the top of everything, and I think they're going to go fast. Joey, let's hear from you.
In the chat room, my wife has this to say. Her name is Monica Livingston. She's the co-host of Reflections, but she jumps in the chat room and says stuff. She has this to say: "This is a great discussion covering many topics, enjoying very much, even Greg's jokes." Wow. Bob has really been hitting a home run in the guest department. Glad to see Greg having guests coming to his show too. Greg had an amazing guest today with Alan Darley. Actually, while I'm talking about Alan Darley, let me just say, first of all, that was a great show, great discussion. And what really impressed me about Alan was that this is going to come off as a backhanded compliment, and I don't mean it that way. I would rather it be framed as a confession on my part, okay? When we first started Greg's show, my big question, and even with you, when we were trying to line up some guests, we had talked about having some people who had some sense of a fundamental position. And one of the biggest questions in my head was who would come on, what person with a fundamental mindset to any extent would come on and have a discussion with an atheist or somebody who they might even consider an atheist like yourself, which you're not, but to some people you certainly seem to be, Dr. Jones. But who would do that? And I think my failure was I felt like that and I'm just being honest here, I felt like that position is irrational, and that it just took a conversation with a rational person for those arguments to begin to crumble. And I think that what I failed to see in my mind is that there are very intelligent people that hold those positions, and I certainly do think they're irrational positions, but not everyone who holds that position is just an uneducated person who thrives on just being indoctrinated and not thinking about what they believe. And Alan certainly does think about what he believes. And so I appreciated his courage in coming on, in being the person who would represent that position, and in holding that position and committing to that position. And what I find a lot when it comes to fundamentalists is that they're certainly willing to commit when they feel like they're around people who can't argue with them. But they really don't want to have arguments, especially in public, with people who they feel are intelligent and who will disagree with them. And Alan did that, and I really admire that.
Yeah. One of the things that I observed during that show was Greg made Alan feel extremely comfortable before the show and during the show.
Yes.
And then Bob Graves steps up to the plate and says, let me explain what I think. This is the perspective of where you're coming from. And so,
but Greg also wasn't afraid to jump in there and be very blunt, and even
right.
At the risk of some tension and some friction,
but
which
I'm
I think was
simply
fantastic.
trying to nuance the point that Bob was just making him feel comfortable, loved, and wanted, because Bob wanted to listen, so did Greg, and both of these gentlemen, that's what they bring to the table of discussion. They bring extreme honesty, and we can't applaud you two guys enough. We fall short.
Do we have just another moment that I can?
Yeah,
I wanted to
we
say,
can actually go overtime. I'm
okay,
the boss.
I wanted to make sure I'm not cutting into your closing part here, but
No.
I think what Bob was saying about having people who have experienced a paradigm shift coming onto his show is a fantastic point that helps to illustrate and to nuance what I'm looking for in guests is people who have a different paradigm than either Bob or I. I would love to see people that I mean, it'd be great to bring on somebody who agrees with me on absolutely everything, and we could sit and bully Bob. But that's not any fun.
That could be very fun. Come on, that could be very fun.
I want people who can make intelligent, articulate arguments for a completely different viewpoint. Somebody who is willing to commit, but is not a crazy person. It's really easy for me to walk out, downtown on a Saturday night and find somebody standing in a street corner holding a sign that says "Repent or Burn," and to make that person look foolish to the crowd. That's not my goal. Is to make people look foolish. As a matter of fact, if anybody is going to look foolish on my show, I'm hoping it's me. I would love nothing more than to have somebody come about and absolutely tear my position to pieces and to expose me for the irrational fraud that I am. But I have yet to encounter that person. And if you think you know that person, please invite them on my show. Make me look silly, because that's not my goal, is to ridicule anybody else. I want good, intelligent discussions about multiple paradigms so that maybe we can have some of our audience end up on Bob's show after mine, after experiencing paradigm shift of their own. So that's what I'd really like to see, is people who can come on and really represent a good, intelligent, and articulate argument for their position, whatever that position may be. And Alan was invited on because of the morality discussion that we'd gotten into, but I mean, there's plenty more things that I could discuss with him and with other people. Any point, any specific detailed point, is something that we can easily, as I think we showed, can talk for an hour about that, or even 5 or 6 if we invite them back to several shows. So anybody making any sort of interesting argument is somebody we would love to have on the show.
You've wowed us. That's good. That's good. Bob.
Hello.
I just want you to go for it.
Go for it, Bob.
Go for
I've
it.
been
Wow
having
us.
a wonderful time just listening to all of this. I'm so glad we had Willie and Craig call in too and address that issue. It was a very meaningful interruption to the flow of everything else. We should do more of that with other issues too. Excuse me. One of the things that I've contemplated doing, and I don't know how well this would go over, but I've been contemplating the possibility of bringing in people from other, what most Christians would consider cultic groups. I'm not sure what to do there, because I don't want it to become a hostile situation, but I'm thinking of some of them that are not necessarily cultic in the sense of control, but just cultic in the sense that they teach things that would be rejected by mainstream Christianity, and have
You mean
them
like the New
come on
Covenant
and
group?
talk about that. Greg, say what?
I said, you mean like the New Covenant group, teaching things that would be rejected by mainstream Christianity?
But
We're going to be the first cult.
Did Greg just call us a cult?
I have to tell you, when I was first invited onto your show, I came across a blog from somebody making that very claim. So, while doing some research on my own, there's somebody who called you very much a cult.
Yeah, we have been plastered across many blogs calling us the cult or a cult. We have been, let me rephrase that. We have been posted on many sites by people who believe that God required a human sacrifice to be happy with us and have called us a cult. That has happened.
Yeah.
It writes itself, people. It writes itself.
I was thinking more in terms of actually, perhaps a Mormon, some Jehovah's Witnesses.
Jehovah's Witness. I'm actually working on getting a Jehovah's Witness on the show, on our show.
Uh-huh.
You guys are going to have to fight over the Jehovah's Witness.
I have this particular Jehovah's Witness is a very good friend of mine. I've known him since I was, I think, 14. I don't know if he's going to be allowed to, given the structure of their church, represent it specifically. Or if we can find a topic that we'd really like to discuss. You'll find actually that the Jehovah's Witnesses agree with much of what the New Covenant group teaches, such as there is no hell. That is one that is, I find, uniquely and very strongly associated with them. I'm trying to get him on, or somebody from his church or his congregation. I've personally I studied with him for years, going over, their interpretation of the Bible and things. So he's been a big influence for me, even when I was going through my faith transitions. He was someone there for me. So I would love to have him on our show at some point. But I like the idea of having other faiths as well, including even Muslims. And I'd love to have somebody Hindu. I've never really had a conversation with a Hindu believer.
Okay,
right,
Bob,
so
I think that you were stating some of the people that you would like to have. Can you continue and finish that?
I think I was pretty much done. Just that I'm not at the same time. I want to make sure that the people who came on had an opportunity to be heard, even if and I would want to do that without feeling like I was obligated to express agreement with them, but to demonstrate the kind of ways in which people are struggling with these issues and the kind of conclusions they're making. Just as a part of, we're talking about intellectual scriptural honesty, that we have to be honest about the fact that there's some people out there who very much believe in some things that maybe the rest of us don't. And I have a friend of mine who is more traditional, who would like to come on sometime and defend that tradition and talk to me about that on the air. And I've thought about doing that. In fact, I'm hoping to be able to meet him for lunch sometime this coming week and talk about it.
I would like to thank both of you guys for doing something that possibly you're not aware of. During the days in which my father suffered, my mother and father would listen to lots of your teachings over and over again, Bob. And it was such an amazing comfort. And then one day I walked in and I was there to give my father a shower, and they were listening to you, Greg, and they found, and please understand that my father was a minister for 62 years, and he was finding comfort in your words, because they were words that were so honest, so incredibly good. And so both my mother and father have found a lot of comfort in your shows, and my entire family has. That is my close family. And so thank you guys for being here at the place with us, part of the New Covenant group, and we can't thank you guys enough. Thank you for being on the show tonight, and we're looking forward to some wonderful shows in the future.
Yeah, it's been great. We need to do it again. I would like to make a subjective argument for ending the show. I have 3 points to make. Number one, we're past time. Number two, I'm tired, and I'm told that when Bob is not on screen that he's expressing expressions of tiredness also. He's hiding them well.
Yeah,
we caught you though.
Of times.
We caught you. And number 3, I'm becoming more and more anxious to put pants on. So 3 very good reasons.
That's what's nice about doing this from my perspective is, coming to, I don't have to sit on a stage. I never wear pants for the show.
Really?
Really?
Yeah. We're still on the air, Greg.
Oh.
Yeah, we're still live.
Now, the cat's
Yeah.
out of the bag.
Yeah. See, we're all tired. He forgot that we were broadcasting live. That's poor. That's poor, Greg. All right, guys. Well, it's been a lot of fun, and our audience has definitely enjoyed you. We've had lots of comments in the chat room and via text, and you've got some fans in the studio and outside of the studio here in Texas and all over the world. And so we'll see you again next week, talking to the audience, talking to our hosts. Any last words before we close? And with that, good night, and play some music right now.
All right. I wanted to apologize. I think earlier in the show, I was talking about you and your wife, Dr. Jones. I think I said Monica instead of Rhonda. I apologize for that. Was looking at the news feed and saw Monica, and the wrong name came out. I didn't realize it until later. I'm like, oh, I said that, didn't I?